Leading innovation requires incredible patience and incredible impatience. It requires optimism and it requires absolutely brutal realism. We look at people. Okay. And biotech is about execution. It's not about theories. It's not about philosophizing about things. It's about execution. It's about finding people who basically to understand this better, there's two types of risk in biotech. There's known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So I think great investors, great entrepreneurs can turn unknown unknowns into known unknowns and initiate plans to take them off the table as fast as possible. And that's what funding does for you. And they're the people that we're looking for.
Welcome to Analyzing Healthcare podcast, brought to you by Scale Community. Scale Community is a global healthcare-focused member network where healthcare leaders come to connect, learn, share ideas, and shape what's next in our evolving healthcare landscape. To take advantage of all that Scale Community has to offer, from expansive content to virtual and in-person events, to interactive peer networking opportunities, and more, check out Scale Community at www.scale-community.com. Membership options range from free to paid, so if you enjoyed today's discussion, please take a moment to sign up for your preferred membership level. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Analyzing Healthcare, the Scale Community podcast. I'm joined by Dr. George Syrmalis. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Roy. It's great to be here. And it's great to be joining such a great and vibrant community.
It's our pleasure to have you. So why don't we start by you introducing yourself and telling the audience a little bit about your background in healthcare.
Okay, cool. So I am by training a nuclear medicine physician. So I have an MD and a PhD. I'm still a fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine. And I joined the dark side of medicine, the biotech community, if you like, back in 1995 by starting up my first biotech company in Europe, which was called Antisoma, and it evolved into the Bionuclear Group. Since then, we sold the company after 10 years in 2005. It was a theranostics company, which was unheard of back in those days. And after that, for the next 5 years, I did some stints as executive director with UCB and Solvay, and a stint at Sanofi, until I repatriated back to Australia, where we set up a private equity type of a business consisting of a group of companies which would acquire IP, develop it, fund it in-house, spin off the SPVs, if you like, the special purpose vehicles, onto an exchange, and then develop the pipeline and sub-license it. Following 2022, I set up an investment banking agent, Bioscience Equity Partners, and we also have a fund called Antisoma Venture Capital Fund, which goes back to 2005. And in conjunction with multiple sovereign funds, East and Asia funds, basically, and through Bioscience Equity Partners and Antisoma, we fund very early stage biotech assets. Tech, digital health. The differentiating point between us and other funds is that we focus on early stage. We do not focus on the first round only. The first round is a minimum of 20 million USD, but we will strategically fund the company for the next 5 or 6 years, meaning that after the first round, we will do a crossover round, which is dependent on the company's development needs. And after 4 or 5 years' time, if the company hasn't sold or sub-licensed its assets, has not created a liquidity event, if you like, then we will go ahead and we will actually list the company on a major exchange. So in short, that's me, and that's what we do now.
What's the success rate that you anticipate when you invest?
Well, okay, when you define success rate, when you talk about success rate, we need to define.
Let's define it as generating a financial return. So money back plus.
Okay. So we've been doing this now for 4 years, roughly. So we have not yet seen an exit. However, our strategy is to de-link the exit liquidity event on a stock exchange, so to speak, from the FDA approval, hence our investment early on the cycle. Okay. So to answer your question, yes, we have not yet seen an exit. We believe that we will be seeing two exits on a stock exchange early next year, and it's not going to be a US stock exchange either.
So this strategy is a 4-year strategy. How much capital has been deployed across how many different companies?
We have roughly deployed over the last 4 years as a group close to about 1.2 billion USD in investments, early stage investment.
That's a significant amount. And over how many assets, how many companies?
Over 52 deals.
Wow, you've been busy. And in how many countries?
Well, let's see there. US is the majority, Korea, Taiwan, China, Canada, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland.
Okay. So what does a country have to do to appear attractive in your eyes? Or do you not think in those terms? Do you simply follow the asset wherever it might reside? If I'm a biotech company in Kenya, are you investing in me? Or are there other exogenous factors that you have to take into consideration as well?
Look, in effect, there are multiple exogenous factors which have to do mainly with governance. So, however, our criteria, and of course, having the scientific and medical background that I have, we put science first, Roy. So it's very important
I
for
imagine
us.
that's the easy part. I'm being facetious, but still, at least that's a contained data set, the science. The exogenous factors can be much more diverse than that.
I
Regulations, taxation, political environment. Yeah.
Absolutely. And governance we take very, very seriously, right? And there are some countries, if you like, or some continents that basically are no-nos, so to speak. So we haven't had many pitches from Africa, but I don't think we would go into an investment in Africa, so to speak, right? We could ask, if the IP is great, we could ask the founders to incorporate or sublicense to a US entity, and then your funding is secure from a governance perspective, right? So the main criterion for us is innovation, but not for innovation's sake. Okay, and what I mean by that is that
You're looking
this
for impact.
exactly exponential innovation in the molecular level needs to translate into exponential outcome for the patient. So if it's a bit of a me too sort of a thing, we sort of stay away. We keep.
So what would be a good example of an investment that you're super excited about that hits that impact or is likely to at least?
Well, we have a tremendous investment live as we speak with gliomas, which are certain tumors of the brain. Usually you're lucky if you make it 6 months. And the technology that this company has proposed is just amazing, to put it to you this way, from a scientific perspective. Their preclinical results are all amazing, and we are waiting to put this to the clinical test in the next few months.
What's the science behind that? How does it work?
Well, it's basically monoclonal antibodies which are injected intratumorally, and they irradiate the tumor. So it's, if you like, immunotherapy combined with radiation therapy.
Okay. What are the other no-go areas? So Africa, no-go. What else is on the list? Non-starter.
Look, one has to take into account that innovation is neither systematic nor is it predictable. Leading innovation requires incredible patience and incredible impatience. It requires optimism, and it requires absolutely brutal realism. So with
By the
this
way,
in mind,
very well said, George.
thank you. So with this in mind, we look at teams, we look at people. Okay. And biotech is about execution. It's not about theories. It's not about philosophizing about things. It's about execution. It's about finding people who basically to understand this better, there's two types of risk in biotech. There's known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So I think great investors, great entrepreneurs can turn unknown unknowns into known unknowns and initiate plans to take them off the table as fast as possible. And that's what funding does for you. And they're the people that we're looking for. Then the other no-go, of course, is intellectual property, lack of intellectual property. There's no no patent protections. There won't be any exclusive sales. So we sort of walk away from big ones as well, right? We walk away from generics. We walk away from biosimilars, so to speak. All that biosimilars will be making in the future a significant contribution, not just to patients, but to health economics as well, government economics and reimbursement. However, they're not our bread and butter.
So are there other continents like Africa, Central South America? No
Well,
interest.
look, we actually have been invested once. I forgot to say that
Or you can
earlier
list countries. Russia won't
in
do
a
business
South
there.
American company. Well, look, I think investing in Russia these days is
Ill-advisable.
yes, correct. It's inadvisable, and it's also inadvisable working with Russian funds and investing in the Western world. Right. I think there are countries, and I want to be very diplomatic about how I say this. That
Look, you're the end consumer, George. You're the one who has to be satisfied.
that that
No one's going to force you to invest in something. You have to want to invest in something.
yes, of course.
So I think some transparency to these government leaders is helpful.
There are countries.
What is the hurdle that they need to reach, and how far off it are?
Well, I think diligence, the cost of diligence, for instance, of doing a deal in India, so to speak. Okay, or Pakistan,
Let's stick with India, a country that's near and dear to my heart. I
right?
love India.
Is
How far off is India from receiving investment from your fund?
It requires a lot of diligence. It requires a lot of knowledge. Is riddled with bureaucracy. So when we then weigh on one hand the cost of opportunity and on the other the potential investment in India, we automatically would rather invest in Germany, so to speak, or in
This
the U.
this is what makes the conversation with you so interesting, because you invest globally. You really get to choose based on lowest cost of due diligence, lowest cost of administration, lowest cost of risk, lowest cost of everything. You're sort of, your water is flowing to where is easiest, which makes sense. Healthcare leaders, if your revenue cycle management is underwhelming you, it's time to rethink your current suite of solutions. Scale Healthcare's AI-powered RCM solutions are purpose-built to protect and accelerate revenue across the entire lifecycle. Denial Shield proactively prevents denials before claims ever go out, using agentic AI to automate root cause detection and resolution. Front Desk Shield streamlines preclinical and front-end workflows, eligibility, authorization, and intake, reducing friction before revenue is even created. And Revenue Shield maximizes charge capture and revenue integrity, ensuring nothing slips through the cracks. Together, the Shield suite helps organizations reduce operating costs, capture missed revenue, accelerate cash flow, and increase productivity without ripping and replacing existing systems. If you're ready for immediate ROI and measurable impact, visit scalehealthcare.com and see how the Shield suite is redefining AI-powered RCM.
Well, yes, in a way, it is. Having said this, I would also say that our favorite investments happen with U.S. companies, right? Because the U.S. mindset, the biotech entrepreneurs, etc., they're set and they're ready to go, and they are very well organized. They're extremely good with execution, so to speak. You speak to some other European companies. I mean, in the majority, they're all good, but they're a bit more slow, if you like. There's a bit more bureaucracy in European companies, especially if you have European sovereign funds invested in the companies. They've introduced certain constraints about what they can do, what they can't do. They can't list on NASDAQ, for instance, in certain occasions with a few of their sovereign legacy investors.
That's interesting. And what about clinical trials? So you invest in early stage biotech. These companies are racing to clinical trial and clinical trial funding as quickly as possible. Where are you looking to host these clinical trials? And where are you
Okay.
looking to avoid?
We prefer actually clinical trials which take place in Australia and Canada and the US and Europe, right? There are certain clinical trials which will have to take place in Japan and China, and it's all quite fine. Okay. And we consider these rate A clinical trials. You see, a clinical trial very much depends on the regulatory agency that it's anchored to, as well as the CROs, the key opinion leaders, which are enrolling in the clinical trials, and many other factors. So a country alone will not determine the success or the validity, if you like, of the clinical trial. There are countries, of course, which are very, very, very difficult to recruit. There are countries, again, that put obstacles in front of the clinical trial. What is very interesting to see is the last 2-3 years, Saudi Arabia has been gaining a massive foothold in clinical
It's so
trials,
interesting. Wow.
as well as biotech investment as well, right?
Along with everything else that they've been gaining a foothold in.
Oh, yeah. Boy, Saudi Arabia is taking this one step further. In 2030, you're going to see organic biotech coming in the Saudi Arabian grounds. I mean, growing their IP, growing trials happening there, preclinical work happening there,
Incredible.
and the FDA is fully geared up to grant those approvals.
So, and you said no one country will dictate the outcome of a clinical trial. So you could potentially ostensibly fail a clinical trial in one country due to, call it, administrative issues, but continue like a portfolio effect to see success in other countries. Is that what you meant by that statement?
Well, it's not exactly that fail, right? It's that one country may fail to recruit the
Yeah.
patients that it was supposed to recruit, which
Operationally fail.
means
Yeah.
correct, yes.
Yeah.
So, but what is important here, apart from clinical trials, is manufacturing, contract manufacturing. So when you're manufacturing that compound that you will use for the clinical trials, it is very, very important that you go to a very good accredited contract manufacturer, CDMO, as they say. And I prefer Western Bloc here, right? 100% Western Bloc. And we have seen this happen over and over again.
But you're not going to Eastern Bloc for contract manufacturing.
Well, we sort of prefer
despite the cost advantage.
US, Switzerland, Germany, Singapore, if you like. There's a couple of good contract manufacturers down in that region, because what happens is the FDA may go for an inspection for a different company. And if you happen to be waiting on your PDUFA, right, and they find a manufacturing defect or a defect in the contract manufacturer's processes, they will not grant you that PDUFA. Right, they won't grant you the FDA approval because of the contract manufacturer, which will lead to another 6 months wait, which will lead to fatigue, investor fatigue. And when the company eventually does get approved, right, because the contract manufacturer will rectify the issues identified, then I think a lot of the steam that was driving the share price will have disappeared. We have a living example of that. I will not say it publicly, but
So you're not seeing the reliable levels of quality in Eastern region contract manufacturing that gives you the confidence to bet on those entities?
mainly Asian. I would say mainly Asian, right? South
Is
Central
there
Asia.
just too much corner cutting? Is there communication issues? Is there too much IP theft? What's driving the concern?
I think there is a bit of corner cutting, and I think that they're not maintaining their standard operating processes
Okay.
to the that the FDA would like to.
So that's very interesting feedback as well. Okay. You're about to, so we've spoken about what your frame of thought is when it comes to the initial investment. When it comes to the trial, if you were to imagine a grid with the 6 countries that you listed, I don't know if it was many, it was at least 5: Australia, Switzerland, Germany, the US, Canada. If you were to list all those countries, I might have missed one, and rank them based on key performance indicators when it comes to clinical trials, like speed of trial, speed to completion, ability to source patients consistently, cost. The concept of clinical trial cost in the US has come up again and again and again. Average now over $1 billion for a clinical trial. I know that's a very sweeping statement. There are all types of clinical trials, and they're not all of them, thank God, are not $1 billion or even close to $1 billion. But large pharmaceutical trials certainly hit that number. But if you were to complete that grid, what would that grid look like? Who amongst those countries would score higher than others, and why? I mean, is there huge variance in time? I'm going through an FDA clinical trial in the US. I'm assuming 5 to 10 years. I'm going through a clinical trial in Australia. I'm assuming 1 to 3 years. I'm just curious to see where the wide variances are.
Look, clinical trials sometimes depend on the indication that you're pursuing as well. So if it's an orphan disease, there'll be very, very few patients, and there could be
Yeah.
multiple companies competing to get that patient into the clinical trial.
Yeah.
So
Plus,
that,
what are you obligated to do, right? If you're obligated to do a 30-patient trial, that's very different than a 3,000-patient trial.
of course, I would definitely go with the US if you ask me. Right, would I want to do my clinical trials? I would go with the US.
Despite the cost.
Yes, because then I can offset the cost because of my speed to the regulator, right? In Australia, for instance, you can do a clinical trial and you will receive a 40-something percent tax rebate on the expenses. And many companies do that. And I reckon that's fine as well, right? But imagine in the US, you have 350 million people pool to choose from for your clinical trials. In Australia, you only have 25 million. Right.
Yeah.
So that would sort of stop you, right?
Yeah. Most people, I know in my country, most people don't realize that Australia is more synonymous with New York State than it is America.
It is indeed. It is indeed, right? It is indeed. And it's a bit more bureaucratic. I like the clarity that the FDA provides.
I think you're a lot more adventurous than we are in New York.
Yes, in the outback.
But keep going. Okay, so despite the cost, you're going with the US because there's someone on the other end of the phone. You have issues, you can speak to a government institution and get clarity in response. So it's the quality of the FDA that you're drawn to, as opposed to the
100%.
Australian equivalent. Who's the governing body in Australia, the
The
equivalent to the
TGA.
FDA?
It's the TGA.
TGA. So you call the TGA, you want clarity on some kind of response to a clinical trial that they gave you, and they're giving you the circle, the runner.
They're considerably slower to open the gate for you to conduct your clinical trial and
Isn't
to
that
actually
amazing?
recruit.
That's what makes these conversations so fruitful. I've grown up for 30 years here in the US, over 30 years. I've never not heard the FDA is so slow. And here you are saying, try Australia. So that's so interesting.
If you want to get your tax rebate, Australia's a good place. I would rather have certainty about my trial, though, and I would rather have direct access to the regulator than claim a 40%, 40 whatever percent it is rebate.
It is interesting when you speak to operators who have actually gone through trials with the FDA, so first-hand direct experience. The feedback I often get from them is, wow, what a great institution. Such high-quality people.
Yeah.
So that is interesting. That reaffirms that. So Bioscience is also an investment bank. Is it a biotech investment bank or is it a healthcare investment bank?
It is exclusively biotech, medtech. Lately, we've been reviewing some digital health deals.
Okay, so you're broadening the life sciences spectrum, and you're also expanding into health tech.
That
Okay,
is
so
correct.
you look at devices.
Yes.
Okay, and so the deals that you do as a banker, do they mirror your investment frame in terms of which countries you're interested in, which you're not, or is it a looser, more flexible framework that you follow?
Absolutely.
In other words, in simplistic terms, will you find yourself doing deals in certain regions that you would never invest in?
Absolutely not. We only do the deals that our fund, Antisoma, participates in.
Wow. Okay.
And
It's a two-step.
Yeah. And then we actually bring in our business partners at the sovereign funds. So we put our money where our mouth is.
And you've been doing investment banking deals through your group, through your entity for how long?
Look, through this new entity here, this global entity, for about 4 years. Our previous entity, which was mainly America, Australia, about 11 years.
Okay. What do you think of the current environment for medtech, biotech, and healthcare IT globally? What do you see?
I absolutely love it. I think there's multiple opportunities to come. And for one reason and one reason only, between 2027 and 2028, and we released a position paper on that a few days ago, more than 180 billion in annual drug revenue will be lost to patent protection. What does this mean in effect? It means that big pharma is going to go after it's going to go after deals, right? And the competition is going to be fierce after this this IP is lost, this patent protection is going to be lost, right? And this is probably the biggest threat to big pharma revenue engines right now. The next 2 years.
Explain that to me. Explain the logic behind those words. So pharma revenue will be lost due to patent protection
Correct.
through the primary active being big pharma. So what are the actual mechanics behind that?
Well,
I'm a big
all
pharma group. I buy IP. I do what? I bury it.
well,
I put
well,
it in my
cool.
library.
Look, all the generic companies around the world, from India right down to Kazakhstan, will start producing these blockbusters that pharma produced up until the day that they lost their IP. They've already have their drug master files ready. They've already done the submissions. They're just waiting for the IP to expire to put all these drugs into the market.
Right.
So what does that mean? That means that pharma's margins are decreased significantly, right? So pharma needs to renew this pipeline, replenish these novel drugs.
It's good. It needs fresh IP, is what you're saying.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And rather than buying the IP, they will prefer to buy an asset in phase 2 clinical trials, completed phase 2 clinical trials, and incorporate that, right? I mean, over the last, if you look at the last...
This is the nightmare of being a CEO of a large pharmaceutical company. Your assets are depreciating every year at an exponential rate. They don't appreciate, they depreciate.
Over the last year, capital has shifted from modality exuberance to de-risk delivery, scale, and revenue adjacency, right? In biotech, for instance, radiopharmaceuticals are winning because distribution and isotope access are modes. Obesity and cardiometabolic adjacencies, right? Payer validated demand. AI discovery matters when it owns program economics and genetic medicines 2.0, which is about delivery and tolerability, not just the editing glamour.
Way too technical for me. Let's dumb it down. So take some of those themes and let's put them in layman's language.
Well, for instance, radiopharma over the last 40 years, and I'm very qualified to speak about this, has been just focusing on diagnosis, right? It was more or less a complementary modality to radiology, and sometimes CT as it advanced, and MRI, it sort of overtook, right, radiopharma. These days, radiopharma has changed. So radiopharma is introducing higher energy isotopes, more specific antibodies, and it's become a major therapeutic modality. That's why you've seen certain big acquisitions which have happened, billion-dollar acquisitions in the field of radiopharma. So big pharma, including Novartis, is buying radiopharma, right? You had these first generations genetic medicines, right, where you would do sort of gene editing, right? There were issues with side effects, tolerability. Some of these were not off the shelf. It had to be custom made for each patient, back and forth, etc. Now you're seeing version number 2 coming in, right? Where you just don't have this editing glamour. We edited the gene, so what, right? But it's actually translated into an exponential effect for the patient, right? In medtech, for instance, you're seeing version 2 again of surgical robots, smaller specialty systems with full autonomy, right? Combine that with AI, that saves dollars and time per case, right? Combine that with point of care diagnostics, right? With vascular and interventional tools, with procedural growth. So all this is just changing the investment focus, if you like. So buyers now, whether they're farmers or investors, if you like, they prefer milestone weighted deals, options to acquire structures, and assets. And this is really interesting, that plug into installed bases. That way you create scale and synergies. So it's simple. If you shorten the path from science to standard of care, or if you control the bottleneck, like radiopharmaceuticals, where I mentioned before, by controlling the isotope production in the pharmacy. So if you can control the bottleneck along that path, capital and acquirers will come and find you.
And the recurring theme seems to be that G2, generation 2 is better than generation 1. So G1 of these drugs and these devices generates a lot of enthusiasm of what's possible, but typically it comes with a steep learning curve. And then you have a gestation period, whether it's 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. But you get to a point where all that exuberance is justified in many cases, and the acquirers come in and they buy a really good product. What about stem cell therapy? Because I know that's been around for many decades, plenty of exuberance around it, but still a sort of a disconnect. Some countries are adopting it, institutionalizing it. Other countries still think it's very speculative, depending on what the application is. Is this an area of tremendous potential, realized potential? What are your views?
I think there's a lot of potential in it, but there's also a lot of way to go to fit it in the therapeutic algorithm. So I don't think it's a matter of whether countries are putting it in or acknowledging it or the regulator is actually approving it. It's a matter of the physicians becoming accustomed to it, simplifying the process of stem cell therapy and getting regulatory approvals and reimbursement channels in place, and then just implementing it.
And you mentioned AI as well. Are you seeing transformative change through AI, due to AI in the clinical trial process, in the investment selection process, or is it still peripheral?
Look, we are seeing a lot of AI, lots of AI, right, compared to 2 years back. Even companies that we saw 3 years back that didn't mention AI, they came back to us 2 years later and now they were AI something. Okay. The problem here is you have to be a very discerning investor and you have to bring in a team when you're doing your due diligence to understand what's a real AI and what's one of those prompts, so to speak. Okay. So I think AI has been very useful today in drug discovery. It has been very useful in guiding process, if you like. So that's more healthcare than biotech. I think it's been very useful as well in medtech, right? Like radiology, for instance, et cetera, et cetera. But it will always be user dependent. I don't think anybody's really going to lose their job over AI. But I mean, we sort of did a bit of a survey here internally, and from probably about 25 or 26 ideals that they pitched us in 2024, only 2 or 3 of them were actually genuine AI, and they hadn't written some sort of a chat GPT prompts to sort of mix into their innovation, if you like, to name it AI. So which I really consider useless, to be honest with you.
So you don't value the wrappers, those AI solutions, those agents that actually rely on ChatGPT or any ChatGPT equivalent.
Well, it depends on how you sell it to me. If you come in, you sell it to me as a prompt and prompt engineering act, I will evaluate it for what it is. But if you come in, you sell it to me as an independent AI system different from ChatGPT, and it's not, I do not.
Okay, I understand. And I can't let you get off the phone without asking about tariffs. So how does the volatility of new tariffs, ever-changing tariffs, most recently 100% tariffs on pharmaceutical drugs, how does that trickle down into your early stage sphere, if at all?
Look, we have not yet experienced.
You're not really commercializing, so maybe you don't
Well,
deal directly with those headwinds, but indirectly.
We have not seen the effect of it. However, we are beginning to see many people who are developing drugs and who will be exposed to tariffs starting to factor that price into their capital raises, right? And it's good that they're doing this. This shows an excellent and amazing, if you like, our team.
And certainly the acquirers that you're dealing with, the large aggregators are dealing with these issues head first. So they have a lot to think about, that's for sure. George, I want to thank you for your time today. We covered a lot. It was very insightful. I learned a lot, so I'm very grateful.
Roy, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to being part of that scale community.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Analyzing Healthcare. Stay informed and stay inspired. Don't forget to subscribe and visit scale-community.com to become a Scale Community member. Until next time, keep exploring the ideas that shape our healthcare systems.